last Wednesday I was not able to be here with the with the passing of my grandfather, and I appreciate Pastor Rick for filling in and wrapping up the Wednesday night series that we did through the book of Genesis. But in my haste to get on the road, we 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 didn't talk about the setup of the live stream. So I wanted to make this video just to touch on. It doesn't have the video that went with the series, but it just to touch on the kind of the brief summary of the life of Joseph that they went through last Wednesday. And so, with that, we are going to be a little bit around the end of the book of Genesis. But let me start with a general overview, and this is just the idea of but God. The circumstances in life that are really really difficult, and we don't know what's going to happen, and we're not even sure how we're going to be a part of it. But then all of a sudden we just remember the goodness of God, remember the fact that God's in control, and then you just say, okay, I don't know what's going to happen, but God. And I think that's kind of a great summary of the life of Joseph. But let's do a general overview first before we get into breaking down the life of Joseph. So a main idea is this: we can trust that God is working even in our difficult circumstances to accomplish His bigger purposes. Kind of touched on that already with the phrase "but God," but that is very, very true. What should I be thinking about with the life of Joseph? Well, to know that God can use our suffering to further his purpose. I know that may sound weird on the surface. The fact that suffering, which in our day and age, the word suffering is absolutely negative connotation. There doesn't seem to be anything good with it. It's painful. It's hurtful. It doesn't seem to be very good. And yet, God can use suffering and pain and discomfort in so many different ways to further his glory and further his purpose. And he does that in the life of Joseph. Which I believe in with the life of Joseph. Well, to feel confident, God has not forgotten us. He's not forgotten us in our struggles, and that our pain is never meaningless. This is a great response to those that ask, okay, what about the problem of pain? Which we're not going to tackle that whole question here today, but that is a very, very honest and very good question. What about pain? If God is good, which he is, then why is there still pain in the world? Well, it's to feel confident that God has not forgotten us in our struggles and our pain is never meaningless. Um, God is good because he gets us through those moments of pain and struggle to help us with future circumstances of pain and struggle, even if they're whether it's the same pain or it's a different one or a different circumstance, we can recall the way that God gets us through our past pain, struggles, hard circumstances, and we can trust Him with the ones that we are currently going through. And then finally, which I do with the life of Joseph, well, to remember during hardships that God is still working and to trust he will not let our suffering be in vain. Kind of going back to what I should think about with this passage, the fact that God can use our sufferings to further his purposes. Now, there was a question that was kind of interesting as I was setting up this study for our church for Broadman, and it's what name a famous family and what made them famous and what about them do you find interesting? There's so many different ones. There's a lot of different choices to make. Obviously, what is getting at here is the family of Abraham. You have Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. You have the 12 sons. Well, actually, there's more than that, but you have the 12 sons of Jacob, and who become the 12 tribes of Israel. And so it's just this really, really interesting look at that family line, which is very, very fascinating. But now we'll go into a summary of the life of Joseph, which, by the way, if you're wanting a more broken down, like verse by verse, or just a really more zoomed in look at the life of Joseph, I actually had the great privilege to go through the life of Joseph with Brahmin Word that we do here on our YouTube channel. So you can go check that out whenever you would like to. But this is going to be very, very just general. So we're not going to touch on every single verse that happens in the life of Joseph, even though that would be awesome. But let's start, though, in Genesis chapter 39. So Genesis chapter 39. So after being sold as a slave by his brothers, his being Joseph, by Joseph's brothers, and being brought to Egypt, God gave Joseph well standing and success, even for a slave. And how is it encouraging that God is with us? The fact that you are going through whatever hard circumstance that you are going through, how is it encouraging that God is with you? Where we can take a look at this is Genesis chapter 39, verses 1 through kind of like the first part of verse 6. So Genesis chapter 39, verses 1 through 6. Now Joseph had been brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, had bought him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man, and he was in the house of his Egyptian master. Just pause right there. So you have the setup where Joseph is being a slave at once he's sold by his brothers into slavery, which is obviously an awful thing that happens to him. But because God is with Joseph, as we see in the first part of verse 2 there in Genesis 39, he becomes successful. I think that's really important that we look at that. Don't get me wrong, Joseph has some fascinating character traits, as we'll see as we go through this general, but as you can also see if you go to the Brahmin Word on this channel as well. Joseph has some great character traits that God has given him, of course, but here I think it's so well written that the reason why he became a successful man is because the Lord was with Joseph. Just again, hear how this is read, or how this is written, sorry. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man. It's not the Lord was with Joseph because he was a successful man. No, it is the fact that he became successful because the Lord was with Joseph. And he was in the house of his Egyptian master. That last phrase is really, really interesting. Yes, it could be very, very common for a slave master to have their slave in their home in order for them to be at their beck and call in ancient Near Eastern culture. However, though, more likely they're probably not in the actual home, but they're more like in a very smaller structure that's maybe attached to the home or detached but not that far from the home, so you could still be there at a moment's notice to do whatever your master is asking for you to do. Here, though, it reads that he is living in the house of his Egyptian master. And this doesn't read like he lives there in like in the closet or the downstairs, the space under the stairs in like Harry Potter, where Harry is sent there to really just kind of insult Harry and to make him feel like he's lesser than the rest of the family. I don't think that's how you're supposed to read this. Instead, he probably has his own bedroom. He probably has a pretty good setup, even though, of course, he's still a slave, right? But he probably has a pretty good setup going on. The fact that he's in the house of his Egyptian master. Something really, really interesting to see for sure. Now, some will say that, okay, well, the fact that the Lord was with Joseph and he became a successful man. Well, the Lord is with me. Can I become successful too? And I think that's one. I totally get it. I totally understand that question. However, though, as we'll see as we go along with this general look at the life of Joseph, uh, the circumstances of Joseph being there are not to make him rich. It's not to make him successful. He becomes successful because the Lord is with him, but he also becomes successful because the Lord has the plan of making him the number two guy in Egypt in order to survive a famine. That's the reason why the Lord makes Joseph successful. It's not just because Joseph wanted $1 million. It's not because he wanted a lot of money. It's because the Lord wanted him to be in Egypt at this time for the very reason to save so many people by coming up with a great plan to get through famine. And of course, Joseph didn't come up with a plan. God told him. But then Joseph told it to Pharaoh. But I think that's really, really interesting to see. But it actually goes a little bit more deeper than that as well. And it's really, really interesting what happens next. So, Genesis 39, pick up in verse 3. His master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord caused all that he did to succeed in his hands. So Joseph found favor in his sight and attended him, and he made him overseer of his house, and put him in charge of all that he had. From the time that he made him overseer in his house and over all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessing of the Lord was on all that he had in house and field. So he left all that he had in Joseph's charge. All right, so, and because of him, he had no concern about anything but the food he ate. All right, so for instance, because of the fact that he becomes an overseer and not just a slave, makes sense why he's living in his Egyptian master's home in verse 2. The fact that he basically gets promoted in verse 4 to overseer of the house. But verse 3 is so interesting. Potiphar literally sees that the Lord is with Joseph. Now, it's a very good question. How could he have seen that? Because of course you could have just said, well, Joseph is a analytical genius. He is a strategic genius, economic genius. He is very, very hardworking. You could throw out all of these descriptions for Joseph, which may be true, but but more so, of course, the only thing that's really pointing out is the fact that Potiphar notices that the Lord is with Joseph. Going back to ancient Egypt's civilization, which we did with the walk through the plagues, for instance, on our YouTube channel as well. But what's interesting with that is that they are absolutely believed in so many different gods and goddesses. And so for Potiphar to go, okay, some divinity is with Joseph is not far-fetched at all. And the fact that Potiphar isn't like he doesn't have a problem with that either, even though he has no clue who this God is, and specifically the fact that he does not know that this God that Joseph believes in and who is with Joseph is the only true God as well. The fact that he doesn't know that, he has no problem with that. And I think that's really, really interesting, because then it's followed up with, okay, yeah, it's not like Joseph just works really hard, but he also finds favor in Potiphar's sight to the point where he gets promoted. He is trustworthy. He is reliable. He is absolutely, he has the characteristics and the attributes to be put in this position as overseer, as we see in verse 5. And so that is kind of a beautiful setup for Joseph. But you may think, okay, so the guy has had an interesting start to his life, but now things seem to be, well, they seem to be turning a corner for the better. But sadly, that's not meant to last. Sadly, even after being sold into slavery, Joseph was faced with more hardship as his master's wife tried to sleep with Joseph, as we see in the last part of verse 6 through 10. Now, before we read that, let me just ask this question. Why do you think hardship follows so quickly after going through another time of trials? I think that is really, really interesting question. But you could also ask a follow-up question. Why is it that hardship or temptation or trials come so quickly after a time of blessing? I think that's also a really interesting question. But let's read in the last part of verse 6 through 10. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance, and after a time his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph and said, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Behold, because of me, my master has no concern about anything in the house, and he has put everything that he has in my charge. He is not greater in this house than I am, nor has he kept back anything from me except you, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" And as she spoke to Joseph day after day, he would not listen to her, to lie beside her, or to be with her. I think it's really interesting. We kind of see this with David in 2 Samuel chapter 11, with his sin with Bathsheba and with Uriah the Hittite. It's interesting that we see that doing this is not just a sin against Potiphar, but it's ultimately a sin against God, which Joseph sees at the end of verse 9. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? Yes, he absolutely, it would hurt and it would be a sin against Potiphar as well. But Joseph understands that every single sin breaks the heart of God. And I think that's really, really interesting to see. Now, back to the question, though. Why is it that hardships seem to come so quickly after a time of trials or after a time of blessing? It's all about, have we learned from lessons past? Have we learned from the trials and the hardships that we've gone through before? Have we learned the fact, okay, I remember to trust God in those moments? So then the next hardship or the next trial, can we recall those moments and go, okay, Lord, just like you got me through the last time, you will get me through this time as well. Do we recall that? Sometimes we do, right? And sometimes we don't. And I think specifically after a time of blessings, that's hard, right? That's really hard, because I think sometimes after we go through trials and they're just followed up by other trials, we go, okay, well, it can't get any worse. So, Lord, I'll just keep riding with you. But after a time of blessings where we start to maybe go, I think I got this. And then the hardships and trials come in. We start to go, where was God in all this? I think that's really, I think that's why that question is really, really interesting. I think why those come up really quickly, God could be testing you to see how you respond to your hardships and trials. He could also be giving you an opportunity to just work on endurance, to work on diligence, to work on depending on God through those things. I think that's why those things come so quickly after times of trial or after times of blessing as well. And I think that's really interesting to look at. But as we go along, thankfully, when faced with this temptation from Potiphar's wife, Joseph did not give in, but he fled, as we see in verses 11 and 12. But one day, when he went to the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house was there in the house, she caught him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." But he left his garment in her hand and fled and got out of the house. So sadly, this leads to more hardship for Joseph as his master's wife basically kind of throws him under the bus. But really, she sets up an innocent man, as we see in verses 13 through 18. Again, this is general overview. We're not going to go verse by verse through everything, but you can go back and read all of these for certain. But this is Genesis 39, verses 13 through 18. So not only is Joseph sold into slavery and then set up, but Joseph is imprisoned. He is put into prison. He's just like, really? And we see that in verses 19 through 23. But this leads to a common question, as we kind of already talked about before. But why do bad things happen to those that are following and obeying God? Well, first off, because we live in a sinful and fallen world. Just because we follow Jesus doesn't mean that we're not going to have a tornado come through and destroy our house. It doesn't mean that we're not going to have somebody hack our credit card, which happened to me recently. But it doesn't mean that our car's not going to break down and we're going to have to repair it. It doesn't mean that our kids aren't ever going to get sick. Just because we follow Jesus, it doesn't mean that the world becomes perfect for us. Actually, sometimes it can become harder as well. So one reason, we live in a sinful, fallen world. Another reason, I kind of just hinted at it, is because the enemy is ticked off that you're following after God. You're following after Jesus. And so therefore, he is going to throw things at you. So I think that's interesting to think about as well. And then, of course, as we kind of already talked about, yes, those bad things happen to those that follow after God. But we, as those who follow after Jesus, know exactly who to turn to and who to depend on to get through those difficult times. And I think that's really, really important to keep in mind. But then we move a little bit forward in time with Joseph. So turn with me, Genesis chapter 44. We're going to be in verses 18 through 34. But God truly was with Joseph, though, as he was freed from prison after helping Pharaoh with his dreams and saving many, absolutely many, from famine. But not only did Joseph save a lot of people, but he was given the opportunity actually to save his family, including the brothers that sold him into slavery. So Joseph put his hatred. He really put his hatred for his brothers behind him and helped them, but he wanted to meet his youngest brother. So we see that in Genesis chapter 44, verses 18 through 23. But this kind of brings up a couple questions for me. First, why is revenge so sweet? Obviously, we don't see that here from Joseph, but it is incredibly it's kind of true that sometimes revenge seems so sweet. Why is that? Well, it's because pride. Like at the end of the day, it really is because of pride. We want to feel better. We want to feel like we have been right, or we have been righted. We have been given justice over those that have wronged us. We want to feel that way, but we're not God, though. And we don't know everything that's happening behind the scenes. Um, but why does revenge seem so sweet? It's because of pride. It's because we have this idea that we have to be the ones that experience justice. We have to be the ones that dish it out as well. I think that's interesting to see why that seems so sweet. And so, how can we combat the feeling of revenge, just like Joseph did? Well, it's one important word, and that word is forgiveness. Absolutely forgiveness. And we see that right away with Joseph, with his brothers. And so we will get to that in just a second. But first, Jacob reluctantly lets Benjamin go with his brothers, but only with a promise. So Jacob, sorry, I thought I said Joseph, sorry. All right, so the brothers go back after being helped by Joseph the first time. They go back to their father, Jacob, not knowing, of course, that this man that has helped them is Joseph. But they go back to their father, Jacob, and says, hey, look, we've gotten all this help, which is great, but the next time that we go, because we'll need more help to get through this famine, because the famine lasted 7 years, we're going to have to bring our youngest brother, because this guy in Egypt told us to bring him. And Jacob is like, absolutely not. The big reason why he says no is not just because it's another son, but it's because Benjamin is the other son that was born to Jacob from Rachel, who is also the mother of Joseph. But if you go all the way back to the last time, actually, with the life of, as we did an overview of the life of Jacob, Jacob loved Rachel more than Leah. And so there's this favoritism going on, and that's still continuing with Jacob and the boys as well. And so I think that's really, really just out. But you see all of that in chapter 44, verses 24 through 34. But this promise of protection, though, which Judah is kind of the one that really steps forward to give that promise to his father, to bring back Benjamin. This promise of protection finally shows, I think, maybe not complete 100% remorse, but it shows a lot more than what they've been showing before. But it finally shows the remorse from Joseph's brothers for what they have done towards Joseph, because of course they know that they sold Joseph into slavery. It's just the fact that their father doesn't know that. But can you imagine, though, what Joseph was feeling and thinking when hearing the love from his brothers for Benjamin, specifically knowing that he was also a son of Rachel? And that happens at the end of Genesis chapter 44. For me, it's probably just this rush of emotions. Like, finally, I'm so glad that you guys finally got to this point. But maybe it was also just like, oh, that would have been really nice if you guys had felt the same about me when I was with you all. Maybe it was a mixture of that. But as we see in Genesis chapter 45, which we're going to next, all those emotions build up but then they all lead to this beautiful moment of forgiveness. And so, Genesis chapter 45, we go. Genesis chapter 45, verses 1 through 8. Well, first, as we just mentioned, the emotions are running through Joseph, and they are just there's so much there. Well, they are just running through him too much, and he finally revealed that he is Joseph. So Genesis chapter 45, verses 1 through 3. Let's start there as we get to the end of our walkthrough or general walkthrough of the life of Joseph. So then Joseph could not control himself before all those who stood by him. He cried, "Make everyone go out from me." So no one stayed with him when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And just think it to yourselves if you're in the brothers' shoes, by the way. Uh, you have this number two guy in all of Egypt, and he has asked everybody to leave the room, and you had this whole thing about the cup was missing and it was found in the youngest brother's sack, and you're just thinking, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Are they going to arrest him for thievery? Are they going to kill him? Or what's going to happen? And all this, and then all of a sudden you see this dude breaking down in tears. You see him just weeping and telling everybody to get out of the room. You're probably thinking to yourself, this dude's crazy and he's going to kill us. I wonder if they thought that, or maybe they just thought, what's going to happen to us in general, because this dude might be nuts. But instead, he makes this beautiful, beautiful just exclamation about who he is. Verse 2, and he wept aloud so that the Egyptians heard it, and the household of Pharaoh heard it. So basically, he's bawling his eyes out. Verse 3, and Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still alive? But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed at his presence. Well, yeah, duh. Like, yeah, I would just, if you're them, you're just like, wait, what? How are you alive? And how are you the number two guy in all of Egypt? And he probably looks very, very probably very close to Egyptian. And so you're probably just thinking to yourself, what's going on? But that's kind of where the brothers probably were thinking. But why is, though, as we're about to look at verses 4 through 8 here in Genesis 45, a big question. Why is forgiveness one of the most powerful actions in life? Have you ever thought about that? Why is it that forgiveness is one of the most powerful actions in life? Well, first off, let's dive into verses 4 through 8 to take a look at this. So you have the brothers have no clue what's going on. Maybe some of them think this could be Joseph. Maybe some of them are like, he's off his rocker. But Joseph continues. So Joseph said to his brothers, come near to me, please. And they came near. And he said, I am your brother Joseph, whom you sold into Egypt. And now do not be distressed or angry with yourselves, because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. For the famine has been in the land these 2 years, and there are yet 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvest. And God sent me before you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to keep alive for you many survivors. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. He has made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord of all his house, and ruler over all the land of Egypt. All right, so this is just a powerful moment of Joseph realizing what God had in store the whole entire time. And you see, and you could just feel the motion of forgiveness in this. And so, how, in verses 5 through 7, how does understanding that God is in control help one to forgive? It makes it so. I'm not going to sit here and say it makes it so much easier. It does, but of course, forgiveness is not meant to be easy where we can just go, oh, yeah, I forgive you and keep walking through our day. No, forgiveness is. Oh, is just this powerful moment of putting aside your pride, of putting aside your just desire to be correct and to want to see justice done for you for what you have been wronged for. It's just putting all of that aside and saying, I forgive you. Even though what you've done or said, or even though that doesn't make any sense, I have forgiven you because Jesus has forgiven me of so, so much more. And I think that's really, really important. And then in verse 8, why does Joseph believe that God sent him to Egypt, especially as he is looking into the faces of those that sold him into slavery? Um, he finally realizes the fact that God sent him on this crazy journey to make sure that he was in the right spot to do the mission that God called for him to do. And sometimes that mission isn't known until right before. Now, for me, I had the great opportunity, the great privilege to be called to be a pastor when I was in eighth grade, and now I'm 33 years old. And so for me, I was able to kind of work towards that mission, right? But for Joseph, it just sprung on him. It wasn't like he had years to prepare to be the number two guy in all of Egypt. It was just God showed him exactly where to go and what to do. And sometimes going where he needed to go wasn't even in his control either. But God showed him, hey, this is the exact point that I've called you to further my glory, which then goes back to that very important question: why is forgiveness one of the most powerful actions in life? It is because at the very core of who we are, it goes against so much. It is unconditional. It's not based on, okay, I'll forgive you if you do X, Y, and Z. Forgiveness at its core is unconditional. And for us as simple fallen human beings, sometimes we think to ourselves that everything should be conditional. Because we want to be in control, because we want to be rewarded for everything that we do and say. Um, but that's just, of course, that's not how that works. But that's how we feel, and that's why forgiveness is one of the most powerful actions in life. Is because it is unconditional. The other reason why it is one of the most powerful actions in life is because the God of the universe forgave you and me and all of those who accept his gift of forgiveness, which was the fact that he sent his son, Jesus, to life to live a perfect life. To die by crucifixion and then to be raised 3 days later through the amazing moment of resurrection, and to trust and believe in him as Savior and Lord. Um, that's for me beautiful, beautiful reasons why forgiveness is one of the most powerful actions in life. And of course, it also teaches us things about humility and putting aside our pride as well. But goodness, forgiveness is such a beautiful, beautiful moment. So thank you so much for spending some weeks with us as we went through a general summary of the book of Genesis. We are going tomorrow, actually, Wednesday, May 27th. We are going to have a lot of fun. We're going to be doing what is called Ask the Pastor Night, where it's of course, it's a challenge for me, but it's also just this beautiful just time together where we're going to have the folks in our church ask questions of me pertaining to the Bible and to the Christian life, of course, because it'd be fun. Don't get me wrong, it'd be fun to talk about who my favorite football team is, but of course, our church knows who that is. Cincinnati Bengals, of course. But but no, we're going to be talking about some great questions that our church members have, and then those who show up to our Wednesday night Bible study as well. Those that have these great questions about the Bible and the Christian walk. And but one of the things that I really wanted to get at is if there was a question that I couldn't answer right then and there, to just show, okay, how do we as believers, if we are given a question that we don't know the answer to right then and there, how do we respond to those questions? Do we just kind of just throw some things out there just to answer the question? Do we say, I don't know, and then just kind of move on from it? No, I think there's a great way to really deal with those times that we are asked a question, whether it's by a believer or an unbeliever, but we're asked a question that we don't know. I think there's a great response to that, and so I'm hoping that there is a moment where I'll be able to kind of show what that response is to tomorrow as we do a fun 1 week. Just time together that's called Ask the Pastor. So that'll be a lot of fun. But thanks for spending some time with me today as we wrap up the general overview of the book of Genesis. But again, thanks so much to Pastor Rick for filling in, even at just a moment's notice. So I could be with family as we both celebrated my grandfather's life, but also mourned for him as well. So thank you so much for spending time with me today. I will see you actually with Broadman Word here very soon. And then hope to see you tomorrow as well with Ask the Pastor Night at Broadman Baptist Church. Thanks so much, and I will see you soon.